A little less than a month and a half ago, I uploaded a video announcing my first ever build challenge on this channel, where I wanted you guys to take real-world album covers and do your best to remake them inside of Fortnite Creative. Well, after weeks of procrastination, days of trying to decide on a top 5, and hours of transferring photos from my phone to a flash drive that I could then put on my PS4, I have finally gotten around to making a video showing off all of your guys' incredible submissions. So without any further ado, let's take a look at everything you guys built for the Fortnite Album Art Challenge. You know, my original plan was to try and line up this challenge results video with when I thought I was going to hit 9K on YouTube, so it could kind of double as like a 9,000 subscriber special, you know? Well, as it turns out, I ended up hitting 9K like 5 days into the challenge, so needless to say, it was a gross miscalculation on my part. But either way, thank you guys for 9,000 subscribers, and now we're here with the results of the challenge. Hey everyone, this is Syntax, and today we're going to be going over the results for my first ever build challenge on this channel. Now, let me just start by saying that you guys absolutely destroyed this challenge. I did not expect to see as much talent as I did, and I am beyond excited to show off what everybody built. And you know, I ended up getting over 30 submissions for this build challenge. 30! I know professional teams that have hosted build challenges that didn't even get close to 30 submissions, so shout out to everybody that participated. You guys absolutely killed it. Also, before I start putting album covers on the screen, I do want you guys to know that I didn't actually get around to interviewing the top 5 finishers. I just never found the time to do it and was simply too lazy, which, I mean, it is my first build challenge, so come on, cut me some slack, would you? Anyway, now that we're past that, I think it's finally time I start actually showing you guys some of these submissions. And just so you're all aware, I did save the honorable mentions and the top 5 finishers for the end of the video, so if you see your album cover pop up before then, it unfortunately means you didn't make it into one of those categories, but you still submitted something, so I figured you deserved a spot in the video anyway. And of course, the odds that I got all of these photos onto the PS4 without having any issues and forgetting any of them are extremely low. So if you did submit something and you don't see it throughout the entire video, I either just never saw your submission or completely forgot about it somehow. And if that does happen, I do apologize. As these album cover recreations are popping up on your screen, I want to take the next few minutes before we get to the honorable mentions and the top 5 just to talk about the challenge in general and some of the difficulties that I failed to anticipate. One of them being how difficult it was to actually get these photos on the PS4. I don't think you guys really understand how much went into this. I mean, I guess technically speaking, it wasn't that difficult. It was more of just an extremely tedious process to get all these photos on here. And just so we're clear, this isn't me complaining about having to do it. Obviously, I brought this upon myself because I wanted to see what you guys were capable of, but I thought it'd be interesting just to kind of explain the process just so you guys know what I had to do to make it happen. I started by taking all the submission photos and saving them to my camera roll via my phone, where I then organized them in my notes with, of course, the name of the album cover and which creator tried to recreate it. I then took these 70 plus photos saved to my camera roll and emailed them to myself so I could have access to them on the computer where I could reliably resize them to the dimensions compatible with the PS4. After individually going through each photo one by one and resizing them to the proper dimensions, I put them all on a flash drive where I then plugged the flash drive into my PS4 and downloaded all of the images with little to no issues. The only semi-annoying thing about this entire process was the fact that the resolutions on some of these images are awful, and that's because a few of the photos you guys submitted started out as really small images, so when I resized them to be compatible with the PS4, of course it did a number on their resolution. The other big thing that I failed to anticipate was how difficult this was going to be to actually judge. I mean, aside from the top 2 finishers, the next 4 to 6 places really could have gone to anybody, and it took me hours of going over different discrepancies to finally place the albums where they are now. As we look at these final submissions before we get to the honorable mentions, you might start to notice that none of these are bad submissions. In fact, they are all really solid, really accurate remakes, but if you remember, there is a multitude of factors that I decided to judge the competition on, and that's the main reason that these didn't get in. Not only was I looking for an accurate remake in terms terms of sizing and color gradients and just general accuracy, but I was also looking at how difficult it would generally be for a Fortnite map maker or a creator to remake the album. I was looking for complexity in the album, and some of these, actually most of these that you're seeing before the honorable mentions, were just relatively simple covers. And I'm not trying to say that any of these album cover remakes were easy to build. I'm sure they all came with their own individual challenges, but when you have two submissions of relatively equal accuracy, but one album cover is more complex, I'm gonna take the one that's more complex simply because in general it'd be more difficult to build. I mean, look at it this way. If I judged the competition solely off of accuracy for the album, then technically Duos with Dad would have won, because he did the all white and all black album covers, which by definition are the most accurate remakes. But the problem is anybody can place down a black square or a white square and say they remade an album cover, so I couldn't do it like that. Listen, every submission that I've shown you guys up to this point was unique in its own way, and while they might not have been a part of the top 5 or in the honorable mentions, they still perfectly represent what this challenge was all about. And at the end of the day, it was someone willing to put their artwork out there and show everybody what they were capable of. Anyway, with all that being said, we have now reached the point in the video where I'm going to talk about the honorable mentions, the 3 people that were just outside the top 5 based on a few technicalities. And honestly, these were some of the hardest decisions I had to make in the whole challenge. There were so many little details that I had to look at that after it was all said and done, these 3 albums ended up in the honorable mentions. For the first official honorable mention, I decided to go with Riverboy's Cult of the Lamb album cover that was remade by Redstone. Now, at first glance, this might not look like an accurate remake, but I want you to look really closely. When I first saw this album cover, I was just thinking, oh cool, another submission for the challenge. But when I started looking closer at all the little details and zooming in on the figurines and the words and the monsters behind the words, I started to realize that this was one of the most accurate submissions. The problem was with how it was framed. In the reference photo from the original album cover, you can see that it looks like the picture was taken really close to everything, and in Redstone's version, there's this dead space in the front of the album. So if you would have moved the words and the big monsters back and then moved your camera forward and maybe clumped together the figurines, you would have been top 5 easily. Redstone, if you're watching this, I think what happened was you misjudged how much space you were going to need to fit everything in frame, and as a result, you ended up having to take the picture from really far away. But regardless, it was still an incredible submission, and you did a fantastic job. This was a well-deserved honorable mention. Anyway, moving on to our second honorable mention of the challenge, I decided to go with XO The End and his recreation of Young Thug's Jeffrey album cover. Now, when I first saw that this was your submission, and out of every album cover ever, you decided to remake this one, I genuinely couldn't believe it. Before the challenge was even announced, I remember telling a few people that if I were to participate, this would be the album cover that I would remake. I don't know why, this is just the one that I would want to go with. So again, when I saw that this was XO's submission, I was just in disbelief. And honestly, he did a way better job than I probably would have, so in the end, it really saved me the embarrassment. I spent an unbelievably long time trying to decide where to throw this submission within the rankings. Like, would it be in the top 5? Would it be right outside the top 5? And after looking at it for so long and comparing it to the other submissions and the accuracy of the other submissions, I decided that because the dress and the hat and everything was just so complex, it wasn't quite accurate enough. And honestly, this was probably one of the most ambitious album covers to try and recreate. I mean, just look at the complexity of the dress. You have so many different shapes going on, you have all these different folds going everywhere, these different colors, and trying to replicate that fabric texture inside of Fortnite Creative is almost impossible. Despite this being an incredibly difficult album cover to remake, you ended up posing him perfectly with his right arm slightly back and the dress flaring out at the end, the way his left hand is tilting his hat forward, and even the little signature above the parental advisory is perfect. So overall, it was a really good submission. It's just really tough to get it as accurate as you can. Anyway, moving on. For the third and final honorable mention of the challenge, I decided to go with Imperial 1273 and his recreation of Billy Joel's The Longest Time. And this album cover recreation was probably the one I spent the most time trying to decide whether or not it should be 5th or effectively 6th. Just from an accuracy standpoint alone, look at the positioning of the hands in his remake. Look at the distance between each pair of legs and the shape of the pants and the shape of the shoes. Even look at the words Billy Joel. All of it is insanely accurate. He got the color perfect and the sizing perfect, and even all the little lines everywhere that you might not have even noticed, like all the ones at the bottom of each pair of these pants or these 2 lines on this guy's right sleeve. Everything about this build was pretty much perfect. The biggest differences you might notice right away are that 1, he didn't put all the little black dots around each of the figures. You might have been able to do it with coal pieces. I'm not sure how difficult it would have been, but I think it would have been possible. And 2, the words "the longest time" aren't exactly accurate font-wise, but the only thing keeping this outside of the top 5 was simply the fact that the 5th place album cover was a little bit more complicated. Of course, by no means am I saying that this is an easy album cover to recreate, but aside from the hands and the shoes, there's really not a whole lot of complex shapes going on. And for that reason, because the 5th place spot was just a little bit more complicated to build, I had to put this right outside the top 5. But still, an excellent job. This was a well-deserved honorable mention and a very accurate remake, so well done. Redstone, Exo, Imperial, you guys all did fantastic jobs with your submissions. You represented the challenge perfectly, and I thank you for actually submitting something. But anyway, with all that being said, we have now reached the point in the video where I'm going to be going over the top 5 finishers of the Fortnite album art challenge. As I was throwing together this list, I knew I wanted to do something different for these submissions, so I went ahead and I downloaded a song from each of the top 5 finishing album covers so I could play that song in the background while I talked about what I liked about the album and why I decided to put it where I did. So, ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, here are your top 5 finishers for the Fortnite album art challenge. Coming in at number 5, we have Chowda with his recreation of Juice WRLD's Goodbye and Good Riddance album cover. Now, this was the one that was in competition with Imperial's submission for a top 5 spot, and after lots of contemplation, lots of decision making, and looking at very tiny details, I decided that this was the more deserving album cover. This album in particular was an interesting one to try to recreate because it almost looks like it was an amateur drawing, like an unprofessional sketch of some photo in real life, and trying to recreate that feeling inside of Fortnite is not necessarily an easy thing to do, but Chowda, of course, with the little marks on the car and in the smoke and on the screen and even in this woman's hair, did an excellent job of getting that amateur drawing feeling. The only reason I didn't put this album cover remake higher on the list is because it could have been made just a little bit better. The sizing on Juice WRLD and the car he's in could have been a little bit more accurate, and me personally, I would have gone with a lighter shade of orange or even more of a yellow color for the background there. Regardless of what could have been done differently, when you look at the remake as a whole and you consider how accurate he got the cracks on the phone screen and how well he remade the font for the title of the album and even how perfectly it was framed, this turned out to be an excellent submission. So Chowda, congratulations on 5th place. Moving on to the number 4 spot, I decided to go with Barry B. Benson and his recreation of Meteor's Defender of the Fleet. The actual title of the album is longer than that, but I refuse to read it all because it is so ridiculously long. Anyway, now that we're back in the land of 3D album covers, take a look at this submission right here. This was one of those album cover remakes where, as I was scrolling through my notes to see all of the submissions I had collected for the challenge, I was having a tough time differentiating between which one was the remake and which one was the actual album cover. From the accuracy of the font and the perspective behind the fighter pilot in the front seat to the fact that he made both of these jets go sort of out of frame like they do in the reference photo. All in all, this submission was insane, and at first glance, the only real noticeable difference is in the sand. And honestly, the sand is really the only thing that gives away the fact that this was made in Fortnite. Now, some of the sizing wasn't as accurate as it probably could have been, like the jets and how much of his helmet was in frame, but overall, this was a fantastic submission. I thought it was a little bit better than Chowda's, and it is well deserving of the number 4 spot. Coming in at number 3 and the winner of the $50 cash prize, I decided to go with The Real Wolf Flow and his recreation of Eminem's The Marshall Mathers LP. As far as complex album covers go, this was one of the most accurately framed and accurately sized submissions that I got for the entire challenge. You have Eminem balled up in front of what appears to be a sewer grate. You have the words Eminem and the Marshall Mathers LP right below it, with the number 21 up there in the top left, and even the bricks next to him are withered like they are in the reference photo. From the font of the words on the cover to the chains holding Eminem down and the trash in front of him. All in all, this album cover is insanely accurate, and the only real noticeable difference is the fact that Eminem doesn't look exactly the same in his remake, which on a smaller scale is tough to do anyway. I honestly didn't even think that Real Wolfflow was capable of building something like this. I don't know why, and clearly I was wrong. So Real Wolfflow, if you're watching this, congratulations on the 3rd place finish, and thank you for disproving any doubtful thoughts I had with regards to your talent. I'll be sure to never doubt you again. Coming in at number 2, the runner-up for the Fortnite album art challenge, and the the winner of the $100 cash prize, we have SNG Osiris with his remake of the JoJo Volume 1 Overture album cover. Now, while it may be the case that I didn't end up interviewing the top 5, luckily, Osiris built this on his commissions island, which has a code associated with it, so I had the liberty of getting an up-close and personal look at how he actually made this thing, and guys, I mean, look at it, come on! Similar to what Chowda submitted, the original album cover looks like a drawing, and we already know that recreating that look inside of Fortnite is not easy, but this example it's perfection. It is nothing short of perfection. The sizing and framing are perfect. The shape of his hair and his head and his jacket are perfect. The colors are perfect. He even got all of the words with that custom font placed perfectly. You can see all of the little black lines that he placed in his hair and next to his eye and on his nose to really effectively create that sort of drawing look. And he put so much detail into the heart on his chest and on his collar and in his eyes, and he even added primitive shapes to the billboards to get a more accurate look for the font. Osiris, if you're watching this, you did an excellent job with this submission. There were so many little details that went into making this recreation look exactly like the reference photo, and for that, you were 100% deserving of the second place spot. So well done. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived at the final submission. The winner of the Fortnite Album Art Challenge and walking away with the $200 cash prize is none other than Coelho with his album cover remake of Iron Maiden's The Trooper. You know what's funny about this is Coelho actually ended up making 4 different album covers. I don't know if it's because he was bored or he just genuinely enjoys remaking these. Either way, you were only allowed to submit one, but he probably could have submitted any of these and still would have walked away with a win. And again, while I didn't go through with the whole interview thing, Coelho did let me into his island so I could take a closer look at all of the smaller details that went into remaking these album covers. And you know, Coelho has been so good at this sculpting thing for so long that whenever he enters a build challenge, you're gonna have a hard time beating him, regardless of what the theme is. It was one thing to look at these creations through a bunch of photos, but when I got the chance to get in-game and take a closer look at all the little details, there were so many things that I completely missed. For example, this little dude down here is comprised of so many pieces, and when I first saw the photo, I didn't even realize he was in the image. It goes without saying that all of his remakes were equally impressive, but I think I spent the most time analyzing his first and official submission because, I mean, just look at it. Look at how much is going on. Never in a million years, if I had to choose an album cover to recreate, would I pick this one. But of course, for Coelho, it's just a casual walk in the park. You can see that he's got the blood dripping from the sword and the tears in the clothes and on the flag. He's got the dead soldiers around the main character in the center. You've got the cracked skull and even the Grim Reapers chilling in the background. You can see it looks like the cannon just went off. There's smoke, there's fire. The words Iron Maiden look incredible. The clothes on this zombie soldier or whatever the hell this thing is were remade perfectly, and even the bottom of the flagpole is starting to splinter like it is in the actual album cover. After considering the complexity of the album cover on top of how well he managed to recreate it, it was pretty clear that this submission was going to be deserving of the #1 spot. So, Coelho, excellent job and congratulations on winning the first ever build challenge on this channel. Listen, this video is already long enough as it is, so I'm going to try and keep this outro relatively short, and if you're somehow still here after listening to me ramble on about album covers for 18 minutes when I probably could have done it in 9, I salute you. My first ever build challenge is officially in the books. This was fun. Next time if I do another build challenge, it's not going to be strung out this long. I'll probably have it be like a week long, and then the results video will be the following week, because a month and a half for a build challenge is just, that's just drawing it out way too much. And I guess technically this video was supposed to double as my quote-unquote 9,000 subscriber special, even though we're way past that now. I do want to thank anyone who has stuck around from the beginning and been able to see me grow as a creator, and anyone who just recently found me who thinks it was worth it to subscribe. You are all equally important in my eyes, and I thank every single one of you. I originally wanted to close out this video saying something along the lines of I plan on uploading more consistently, but I think we all know that that is unfortunately not the case. So anyway, guys, I really do hope you enjoyed this video, and yeah, this has been Syntax. Later.